This roundtable is how shops and students can attract more students to the industry. We've got some people from the education side, from the school side, and from the industry side as well. So I think we're going to have a lot of really, really great insight, and I look forward to talking to all of them. As I introduce you guys, if you want to raise your hand when I call your name, that would be great. First, I'm going to start with Steve Hamre, who's the National Technician Recruiting Manager for Lithia Motors. Steve, welcome to the panel. He's going to bring a lot of fun and a lot of excitement to this. He's a great person to have on here. George Arrants, who's the Vice President of the ASE Education Foundation. George is really, really well known throughout the industry. He also is going to bring a lot of great insight to the panel. Ben Zimmerman is the tech ed teacher at Verona High School. We've been able to work really closely with Ben on a couple different initiatives, and excited to have Ben here as well. Dustin Doyle, who's a service technician from Truck Country. Thanks for joining us tonight, Dustin. Dustin's got, even though I'm not sure about this Iowa shirt, Dustin, but other than that, I think we're okay. And then lastly, Noah Wainwright, who's a student at DMAC, Des Moines Area Community College. Welcome, guys. I'm excited for tonight. I want to start with just kind of a quick rundown of the agenda of everything that we're going to be talking about, and really kind of how we segmented this. This is a little bit of a different layout than what we had for technician, but kind of the same kind of foundation as far as how we're going to go through this. So the first part is setting the foundation. We're going to start with Noah, Dustin, and Ben to talk about kind of the current state of where we stand at, why students are coming into this industry, maybe why students aren't coming into this industry. So we'll have a talk with these guys to start with. We're going to follow that up with a working together segment in which we're going to bring Steve and George into the fold and really dive into topics related to what we heard in the first session and the first part of this, and then really kind of go from there. So let's go ahead and get started with the conversation itself. We're going to start with you, Ben, right off the bat. I'm gonna hit you right off the bat here. One of the things that we're looking at, right, as a core fundamental piece of getting more students involved is trying to get them involved at the high school level and maybe even prior to that, right? And in conversations that I've had with you, one of the things we talk about is getting students to even know you have a program, right?
Yes.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how difficult that is? Now, granted, you've got a bigger school, the biggest high school, I believe, in Wisconsin, right?
Not population-wise, but yeah, size-wise, biggest high school in Wisconsin.
It is gigantic. It's a big one.
Yeah, we moved into it. Well, we got the keys in August, and that did us a lot of good because we've been virtual. So a lot of work for not a whole lot. So it should be simpler for me now. At the old school, I had a 2-bay shop, and they were a forward and reverse bay. So literally you could fit 2 cars, nose to tail. And we were buried in the basement. Most people didn't even think there were classrooms down there. And so now I still call it the basement. We're down like a half flight of stairs from like the commons area, but we're in a pretty good area to be able to get traffic to us. And I still don't know how I feel about it, but we have basically glass walls into the shop. So kids can walk by, they can see the cars, they can see what we're doing. Jury's still out on that one, but we'll see what happens.
Now, do you get traffic by that because you're so far down, like kind of in your branch?
Should not. I literally, the metal shop and auto shop are the last thing down that hallway, and the gate leads out into a fenced-in area. So I would hope that there isn't a lot of traffic through there, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
Now, this year is obviously a unique year, right? It's not similar to any other year that we've had in that we're experiencing COVID. A lot of schools are shut down right now. There are some that are operating if they are running virtually or some type of hybrid model. how do enrollment numbers look for you, Ben? I think they've strengthened up a little bit, haven't they?
We'll see what happens in about a month, because that's when we start asking kids to sign up for classes and stuff. And it's really tough having kids sign up for classes when we literally started second semester today, and now in less than a month, hey kids, you need to figure out what you want to do for next year. So that's kind of tough. I have actually talked to a bunch of my welding kids today, and like half of two separate classes were like, I want to be a mechanic. I'm like, why have you not taken my auto classes? Like, what's going on here? There's a problem. And so we'll see what happens. Part of that is, our kids just telling you what they think you want to hear, or are they truly interested? I don't know. I do hope that this pandemic does help us a bit, because the kids are seeing who's working and who's not. Right. And technicians are working, technicians aren't getting laid off. And that goes for trades too. All of that, those are all businesses that are still growing and thriving and not having any issues. And so I think kids might be seeing that. And if they are, I really hope that that turns into something positive.
So typical demographic or kind of profile of a student that enters your class, is it still maybe an area where somebody that's not performing as a student goes, or are you seeing kind of maybe a change and a shift to some of those engineering focused students, or give me an idea of the typical student that comes into your classroom?
It's a little bit of a mix. Verona's a very different school district. I know the more rural districts, there's a lot more farm kids. There's a lot more kids that are interested in that kind of stuff. Verona's a fairly urban district. I was actually talking to the ag teacher, and there are 0 farm kids in our school right now.
Wow.
So there's 4 years where there's not one kid that grew up on a farm in the school.
That's saying something in Wisconsin. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but I do get some of the engineering students. I get some of the, there is a little bit, I'll call it a dumping ground, but a lot of times those rougher kids that the counselors don't get and they struggle in other parts of the school, I can hook, line, and sinker and get them interested. And, once you get those kids, they're loyal to you. Yeah. It's just a matter of getting those kids.
Well, and getting to them and understanding that there's a purpose, and that, it is something that you can be successful at, even if maybe there's some struggles with some of the other classes. Now, Noah, I want to shift to you here, because I think your background is extremely intriguing to me, in that you probably had some options outside of, as you're leaving high school, and walk me through that a little bit. Did you have options other than going into DMAC? Oh, hold on. I'm not getting your sound there, Noah. Sorry about that.
There you go. Can you hear me now? Okay. Yep. By my senior year, I was pretty set on being a mechanic, but prior to that, I actually wanted to go into computer software development and stuff like that. And I'd taken a couple CAD classes with a teacher who also did engineering stuff. But I mean, yeah, for a long time I just wanted to do computer software engineering, and I got into cars once I could, turn 16 and buy one.
And so what was that kind of changed your mind from going the computer software route to automotive?
Just kind of working on my own car, and I don't know, I really enjoy working with my hands rather than just sitting down for hours at a time. And I just feel a lot more satisfaction with a job completed, when you're doing something physically rather than just something on a screen, or,
So how did you learn about it? So as somebody that didn't really have a background in it, what got you interested in it, and what was kind of the appealing piece of coming into this business?
Well, I first got into cars when I had a buddy whose dad autocrossed, and then I just kind of started working on my own, and I enjoyed doing that. And you start looking at the cost before your college versus something like DMAC, and I don't pay anything in tuition. Like the state pays all my tuition, and that's just a huge benefit to not have that burden on me coming out of school and still being able to make good money.
Yeah,
And
that's
also,
great.
yeah.
Now, was that something you had to apply for, or like the tuition assistance, or was it something where like a program they're trying to get more people into the program?
Yeah, it's for a lot of schools in Iowa. It's called Last Dollar Scholar, and it's for a lot of trades at a lot of different schools. And depending on like your family income and a bunch of other things, after you apply for FAFSA, they automatically apply it to your financial aid.
That's awesome. Now, something that was intriguing to me when we spoke was you had some level of introduction to it through YouTube as well, right? Or whether it's maybe a I don't know, like some type of video. For example, I gave a talk at a high school class in Phoenix last week, and one of the things that really stuck out to them was like Hoonigan, right? Or it was something where there was drift cars and stuff like that. That's maybe non-traditional auto sports. Did you get any exposure to that end of it?
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't say that like started my interest, but it definitely helped like fuel it when I was, just looking for something to do related to cars. And
Cool.
you could go online and see all these people doing all these different sorts of things. And that's kind of how I started like learning about it before going to classes, or like just learning other things outside of what I was learning in the classroom.
That's interesting. And so what have you learned so far about the industry?
I've learned it takes a lot of experience and talking to other people to be able to make it at all. Like you need to communicate with other people and learn from other people and just kind of grow your own knowledge. And that's kind of the best way to move through the industry and make your way.
You're a quick study. I think that's what the best of the best in the industry do. So that's great to hear. And Dustin, even though you're wearing an Iowa shirt, I'm going to move on to you next. How are you tonight?
There we go. I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm good. So kind of as an extension of what Noah was talking about there, right? We were talking about, you're what, 3 years in now?
Yeah, 3 years. Yep.
3 years in, and maybe give us a little bit of your background. What got you into the business? What got you interested in becoming a technician?
Okay, well, I actually started as a technician later on in life because I joined the military shortly after high school. I was actually in the medical field, but growing up, I've always been interested in working on vehicles. I've always worked on all my own vehicles. I've never been the kind of person to say, hey, I'm going to take it to shop and pay twice as much to get maintenance done. I want to do it myself. So I went in the military, was in the medical field, didn't really enjoy that, got out, kind of had to search for what I really wanted to do, and kind of always started falling back onto my true passion of working with my hands, working on vehicles. I actually got into the aviation industry side. Hauling landing gear for airplanes and stuff like that. But where I'm living here in Iowa, there really wasn't a lot of room for improvement. And when I met my now wife and her father-in-law being a truck driver, kind of pushed me towards the diesel side. And I kind of fell into the company I'm working with and actually found them online, started talking to the service manager and was offered the job. And, I've never regretted the move. It's one of those industries that, I was actually thinking about today, what I dislike about the company or industry in general. And I have yet to find something I do not like about the industry. I actually enjoy going to work every day. If that's a rarity, I'm probably one of those crazy people that actually enjoy my job. But, one thing I really do enjoy about the industry is it's ever changing. You never know everything. You're always going to learn something new each and every day. And I'm constantly asking our senior guys questions. I probably annoy the heck out of them quite often because of the questions I ask. But, that's one great thing about the industry is there's so much changing and so much to learn. It just really, to me, it's fun.
how important is that leadership in the shop, Dustin, in terms of?
I believe it's huge.
Yeah.
You know, if you have senior guys who are actually willing to help and willing to teach you, it makes not just learning the industry, but actually makes your day-to-day a lot easier, because, you know, you don't feel like if you're stuck on a project that you're stuck alone.
Right.
So
so from veteran techs in the shop, get a pretty good feel that, you know, they're willing to help you out and they're not annoyed by you when you go ask them the questions?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anybody there who actually isn't willing to help.
Yeah. That's one thing that I would say, with a difference that I can tell from a really, really well-run shop to maybe some that aren't as well-run, is that piece right there, right? Because a lot of times you'll have that master level technician that doesn't like to train or doesn't like to talk to others. And one, that's just somewhat of some people's personalities, right? But you need to have that person that does have knowledge, that can share some of that knowledge and can be open. I know when I was a young tech, like, if I didn't have that person to ask, you start to freak out and like things start to go haywire, and you just need that comfortability, like that comfort level of somebody willing to help you out. And in your case, Dustin, you're working on trucks. That there's some expensive trucks out there, so it's kind of intimidating from the level of just trying to get comfortable with that, right? Like, oh my gosh, this part costs this much, and I'm putting it on this truck. Like, it kind of can freak you out a little bit.
It hits your nerves on a different level.
So how is the general perception amongst newer techs? You know, when it comes to getting, say, their friends into the industry, and maybe if you're looking at somebody around like Noah's age and trying to talk to them, what advice would you give to somebody like Noah on like trying to get into the industry and maybe some of the road bumps you kind of had along the way?
Well, as far as road bumps, it's, you know, I'm trying to think of how to explain it.
Yeah.
There's always going to be challenges. You know, there's always going to be issues. But one thing I tell at least the new techs coming in is, don't be scared to mess up. You're gonna mess up throughout your career. So the biggest thing about when you mess up is learn from those mistakes. You know, that's how you're gonna truly learn and succeed, is to not be afraid to make mistakes, but truly take those mistakes and use it as a learning experience.
Yeah, and I think you at Truck Country, I think you guys do about as good a job of that as anybody out there, in making you feel comfortable, giving you training when you need training. And that's such an important piece for those on the industry side, that continuing education and how fast technology is changing, because it's changing at such a rapid pace. And I think that is such a key piece of that. Now, Ben, I'm going to shift back to you here a little bit. When we talked to Dustin, one of the things we talked about is general perception amongst students. One thing I know that I've been concerned with, and something that I think is something we need to work on maybe a little bit more in depth, is the perception of parents and what role they play in allowing their child to come into a program. And say if it's somebody like a Noah, who is a good student, might not want to steer them that direction. Do you have interactions with parents that are concerned about that piece, or are they open to it? You know, maybe walk me through that a little bit.
So I've had I'm a newer auto program, so I haven't had a ton of conversation with parents about it. Typically, the parents that I get are like, my kid has had no idea what they want to do. They took your class, they love it, they want to continue it. Now, is that going to be a sticking trend? I hope so, because that would be awesome. But But I reached out to a bunch of the other auto teachers in the area that have more established programs, and they're still running into the parents think that, you know, the reason they're in my classes is because they're lower achieving students, or it's still that dirty old industry that's perceived in movies and TV and what they saw in the 70s or 60s even, you know, the old greaser days. Now, to get around that, we work with youth apprenticeships. And when we do youth apprenticeship, we take a high school junior or senior, we let them out of school early, we help them find the job. Now, we don't have any pay requirements or anything like that. That's all between the employer and the student. But we have the student and the parent sit down with the employer, and the parents kind of get interviewed also, and they get the opportunity to walk to the shop, and they get the opportunity to see what's really going on there. And typically, if you can get the parents to go along with that and actually go see the facility, talk to the employer, you typically get them every time.
I think that's huge. And one reason I'm going to say that, and Noah, I'm probably going to go to you next again, is there's some level of intimidation factor that we're battling too, right? Where, you know, what Dustin and I just talked about with regard to how expensive some of these trucks are. And if you go on the car side, you know, if you go into a dealership or even, I'll be honest, when I got into the industry, well, I grew up in it, but like going into other shops and having the idea that I wanted a job there was kind of intimidating. Noah, for you, is there any level of intimidation? And I don't even know if intimidation is the right word, but maybe some level of anxiety of walking into a shop somewhere and saying, hey, you know what? I'd like to work for you.
Yeah, a little bit. I familiarized myself somewhat with it because I worked in detail for 2 years at a shop, so I've kind of got to see how it works without actually, you know, being on the tech side of things, which is kind of nice. But it can definitely be overwhelming to a point, like trying to imagine yourself there when it's not really something I've ever done before.
So when you walk in and that tech that's been there for 30 years says, "Who are you?" That kind of make you feel weird.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't luckily had to put myself in that situation quite yet, but
That's good. When I first started out in a shop that wasn't my dad's, I worked with a guy that looked like Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he was terrifying. So I can empathize with that piece a little bit. Dustin, did you see any? I mean, did you have any of that piece? And maybe with you being a little bit older coming in, that might have been a benefit for you.
I was sorry. Say it again. I missed the question. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So, like when you came in, did you notice any of that? Like, were you somewhat intimidated, or were you just like, let's get to work? Or were there any factors, I guess, that were that made you not feel at ease when you're walking in the door?
Yes and no. Yeah, there was the intimidation factor of, you know, these trucks are huge. There's a lot of components and electrical and, you know, stuff that I was unfamiliar with, coming from the airplane side and just doing my own stuff at home. So there was that intimidation factor, but I guess, you know, me being a little bit older and kind of having the mindset that I have, I wanted to jump right in. And that's kind of how I was. So as far as the intimidation, that's how I got over it, was just going for it.
That's awesome. I think we could use that mentality in a lot of people, and it can be an intimidating process. So I commend you on that. We do have a couple of live questions here, and Noah, I think you're typing an answer to this, but I think we should talk about this on air, if you don't mind. But the question is, Noah, when you are getting close to graduation and start looking for a job, what's the most important things you would be looking at from an employer? Salary, time off, health benefits, work-life balance. Have you put any thought into that?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of sat back for a minute and was thinking about it, and I think the most important thing to me would just be a clear career path to actually stay in one place and work my way up without having to bounce around to different shops. So just more like a job stability and career path, with probably pay being a close second.
Yeah. So when you talk career path, you want to know that if you do your job, like there's other levels that you can go to, right?
Right.
Interesting. Dustin, how about you? When you were coming out into the workforce, what is it that you're looking at with shops?
A lot of it is more of a work-life balance. I do have a family. I have 3 small kids, a wife. So for me, it was a lot of work-life balance. The company I'm with now does a really good job of that. But secondary factors, you know, you're obviously wanting to make more money in life. But the biggest thing for me is work life.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more common, especially with young families and young technicians. It can be hard to juggle schedules and juggle weekends and weddings and all of that fun stuff. So, Ben, I've got a question that I'm going to go to you with that I think is a really, really interesting question. And I don't know how detailed we can go with this, but the question is, does anyone know if guidance counselors are incentivized for pushing students toward 4-year colleges versus a trade or technical school?
Yeah, so I was reading that one and I was tempted to type to it, but I was kind of hoping you would go to it. So I can only speak to Wisconsin. I can't speak to what other states do. But here in Wisconsin, the amount they care a ton about college readiness, career readiness has been kind of on the back burner. And that's very sad to me, because if you focus career readiness, you'll still succeed at college. And the bigger kicker is we have so many graduation requirements right now. Like a freshman in our program or a freshman in our high school only gets 1 credit of elective. So that's only 1 elective class each semester. And if they're in band or choir, they're gone. Like if they like either of those, we will never see those students.
Wow.
And so APs, advanced placement classes, get pushed really, really hard because they end up on our school report card for the state, and the communities care more about that report card looking good than anything. And that's because they want that report card to, they think that report card is going to get people to leave the neighboring school and come to us, because we are running education more as a business. Like I said, I can only speak to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And, by getting more students and making your report card look better, you technically get more state funding.
I think that's always the question. I hear that question a lot. And I think just having an understanding from the industry standpoint, and even why we're having this conversation, is such a key ingredient to knowing, okay, if the school's report card reflects this and their funding is a result of that, are there opportunities for us as industry to go into those schools and talk to them and try to get an understanding of what that report card looks like? Well, regardless of what state you're in.
Even if you're discounting, if you're not looking at the report card at all. So I can honestly tell you, I've worked at 2 separate schools, and I've only had 1 counselor of the 7 that I've been around actually show up in my space. So the amount of counselors that even know what happens is different. I don't know that they really know what we do. I don't know if they really know what our program is. And that doesn't help either.
Well, I think you lump that into the education, like we talked about with the parents too, right? Where
Yep.
you have to educate that guidance counselor regardless. And I'm sure there's some of you on the attendee list today that are a part of the school side and maybe have a really good relationship with your guidance counselor. Maybe that guidance counselor is an exceptional person that understands that or goes the extra mile. my experience has been, I have not seen that, or have not seen it a lot. And I think getting guidance counselors knowledge of the industry, showing them that, you know, this is a pretty important deal, because if you take your car to the shop and they don't fix the brakes correctly, you're in trouble, right? And so like that's a pretty key element to their daily life, and showing them that it's not what it used to be. And especially, you know, some of the guidance counselors that don't have that background or very, very much have an education background, I think can be tough to have a paradigm shift with. So I think we've got a couple more questions here that I want to ask. We've got about, I think about 10 minutes on our little, this little discussion here, but Ben, are you seeing more females registering for your program? I think that's a great question.
Not enough.
Not enough. Yeah.
You know, I think so far this year, I have not had a female student. I know I have 3 or 4 coming up in fourth quarter. At the first school I taught at, we were able to get a decent group of female students. Granted, more rural district. We were able to get a good group of freshman female students that worked really well, and that blew up at that district. I took an opportunity and I left that school, and I'm working on it here. But you know, it coming from the education standpoint, you can't just walk around and be like, I need more female students in my area. I did ask about, could we offer like a female only automotive class or something like that? And apparently that's not something we can do.
Yeah, and I'm reading the comments from the chat, and they're fascinating comments. And I think you can tell the passion level of the industry through the comments here, because this is really, really cool to see. And some of the comments, I see Brad Warren put, we had an all girls class in Montana, 24 at a huge success, 24 at a time, huge success. That to me is such an untapped resource, and something that, you know, as we get more knowledge and more, I don't know, more acceptance, we're going to be shocked at the ability of some of these ladies and what they can do in our industry, just because they're so talented. And like there's different ways to, I think there's different ways that we're appealing to them now too. And I think that's really a big piece.
Yeah, the female students, the ones that I do see, put so much attention to detail. Yeah, they take a little while longer to do their work, but they don't rush through it, and what they do is perfect. Like their write-ups are perfect, like all of that. There is, you know, you can look at it and you can nitpick, but you can nitpick a master tech if you really wanted to.
You could.
It's not going to go well for you, but you can do it.
We're going to keep going on a couple of these questions because I just think they're outstanding. Ben, how's an automotive school's ops graded? Like, so how do you know you're doing a good job?
That's a good question. I haven't had to have mine looked over yet. We'll find out here in probably a year when I have ASE come through and attempt to certify my program. Hopefully, we got to start our paperwork and start working through that. So yeah, my program is literally only a year old. So right now, if I have kids that understand the soft skills and understand how tools work, that's a success right now. Now going down the road, when I can get them deeper and more involved in everything, yeah, I'll set my own metrics, but I don't think there's like a full metric out there of like, this is what you have to do. I kind of leave that up to the advisory board that I'm putting together and the employers that hire my students.
This is awesome. Mark Cunningham says, Ben, when does your tech school start to introduce students to your program? He says their local tech school brings all the sending school 5th graders to the school for a class trip. Do you get that level of exposure?
we get the 8th graders, and we do offer a middle school tech program in, I'm going to be wrong here, and my middle school teachers are going to be mad at me, I think 7th grade, but it is mainly AutoCAD, not very in-depth at all. It's not much.
Yeah. Noah and Dustin, I'm going to go back to you here for a question that Scott Saxton asked. And I think, so Scott asked about the idea of maybe a shop providing tools for you. Dustin, since you've been in the industry for a little bit here, what is your thought on that? And this is one that I think, I don't know if I'm starting to see a change in thinking, but traditionally it was kind of a source of pride, right? For a tech to provide their own tools. And honestly, I loved going on the Snap-on truck or the Sonic truck, or getting Sonic tools delivered to me, I should say, or Matco Mac. It was always a kind of a fun thing for me to do, but wondering if that's starting to kind of shift a little bit.
I'm kind of hit and miss on that, because I do agree with you as far as the pride of having your own tools, of having, for me, it's more of, these are my tools and I can use them later on down the road, because throughout my career, I'm gaining a skill set that I'm going to use my entire life. I can take them home when I, retire at, end of my career, whatever. But at the same time, as far as providing tools, our shop provides more specialty tools, such as, torque wrenches for lug nuts, or for our mains and stuff like that. We're doing engine overhauls, or other specialty tools that you need. Our company, I should say, actually also does a reimbursement program. So if you go through a lot of their training that they provide for you, you can buy tools, and they will reimburse to a certain amount. So that's kind of a neat thing. So it's still technically your tools, but the company is investing in you by saying, we're going to buy these tools for you, in a sense. So,
couple more questions. No, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that or not. And it might be interesting to hear. Maybe I might stick on that for just a second, because for you, not coming from industry, is that something that you were aware of, that the initial tool investment, and is that something that you look at as something that deters you from the industry, or something that you like?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that I like, but I definitely enjoyed being able to, go pick out what I wanted and get used to, my tools. And it's something I'm going to take with me. I mean, I agree a lot with what Dustin said about taking it through your whole career and later on in life. But I think it makes sense for shops to provide specialty tools and brand specific tools and stuff, but for mechanics to generally have their own set of standard tools.
Yeah. Just one last question here for Ben, and then we're going to bring in Steve and George. Ben, the question that Eric Antonson asked is, Ben, does your administration allow you to bring in business managers from industry to speak on career opportunities for the purpose of generating interest?
Yes. The short answer, yes.
How does somebody go about that? Do they just reach out to their local tech school instructor, guidance counselor? What's the best way to go about that?
You can reach out to the teacher themselves. Typically, administration is going to be all for that. If you reach out to administration, they should put you through. I've had a lot of people reach straight out to me. I tend to be pretty proactive. So when I first got to Verona, I still do metals and automotive, and I had primarily metals classes, and I went and hit every manufacturing company in the city. Everyone that was in our district, I hit within the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And set stuff up with them, went and talked with them. Even if I had, I don't even have kids to go there. I don't know who's, I don't have any of that yet. I just wanted to make those connections immediately. And I have there's local people that want to come in and talk and sell themselves, sell what they do. I bring the local tech colleges in. I try to get my kids as much exposure as I can.
Well, and I think that's something that Mark Wilson, my business partner here at Find a Wrench and WrenchWay, he's actually going to be talking towards the end today tonight about the launch of our WrenchWay School Connect. And it's kind of an optional piece of this, but I think it's really, really important and something that can help industry connect with those folks. So that is great. All right, why don't we've got a bunch of questions, and I think what I'll do is hold some of these questions to the Q&A. And as we're kind of shifting here, I want to say thank you to the first three here that were really, really involved. I mean, Noah, Dustin, Ben, that perspective is unbelievable. We're going to keep you on here, if you don't mind, while we talk with Steve and George, because I think there's some things that we're going to loop back, right? We're going to tie back. And so if we can, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Steve and George here. We had a brief introduction at the top, but Steve, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as far as kind of what your role is and what you do at Lithia?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Jay, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. So I am the National Auto Technician Recruiting Manager for Lithia Motors. I started as a service advisor, worked into a service advisor trainer, and then eventually we noticed that we needed to get a lot more aggressive with recruiting and retaining technicians. So I started in 2014 recruiting technicians, and as we've grown and as we've realized the need is not going away, they've allowed me to move into a more management role and hire more automotive only recruiters to recruit technicians. A lot of what we do is work with schools and work with entry-level technicians and work with all of our stores on mentorships. And we get a lot better retention that way and a lot better loyalty, and we can grow them into bigger positions for our company.
George, do you want to kind of do the same thing?
Sure. Thanks again, everybody, for allowing me to be part of this. At the ASE Education Foundation, Vice President. Really, my background, I taught high school and college automotive. Probably spent the last 25 years teaching industry and education how to work together. The first thing is they talk two different languages and don't understand each other. That creates the first problem. And then sometimes some of the things that we talked about earlier are the misconceptions that exist within education or parents or counselors, and some of the things that industry could do very easily in their local community, but they don't. And those little things create massive gaps between these students being qualified applicants and going to work in the local community and supporting those businesses and going off into another occupation or different direction. So here at the foundation, I really work with program accreditation and helping schools earn accreditation. And that process is really about a program evaluating itself like a gap analysis to ensure that they have the resources they need to properly prepare young people to enter the workforce. And then also working with potentially intern mentor training and items like that.
So I think the cool part about our panel tonight is we've got really, really varied levels of experience, right? We've got some people that are just starting out in the industry, you two who've been in the industry for a long, long time.
I refer to us as the gray hairs and no hairs.
Any initial thoughts on the first part of our conversation here? With kind of that initial discussion?
Steve, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
I was just very happy to be here to listen to all that, and it's certainly a lot of things that we see across the nation. I'm happy to let everybody know that we do a really good job recruiting females. In fact, the first 2 automotive technician recruiters that I hired are both female. Both were technicians in different parts of the industry and have moved their way up quite well up the ladder. We have females becoming service managers. We have service managers becoming general managers. So we are very always happy to have female applicants, and we do work with a lot of schools in helping them to encourage more female students to get into the industry. There's been a lot of talk about support of entry-level technicians with tools, tuition reimbursement. We are like many others in this industry that we are constantly striving to better our program to attract more entry-level students. We have a tuition reimbursement program. We have a tool assistant program. And then as Dustin spoke earlier, all of our shops provide all of the specialty tools. Most of our shops spend on average over $10,000 a month just on keeping everything up to date through manufacturer specification. And that includes diagnostic tools, diagnostic software, subscriptions, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing our best. We're working at entry-level technicians getting a set of tools that they work off. So after 2 years, those tools become their property, and then they kind of are led in a way to invest in tools that they will need and use. We try to keep them out of some of the predatory tool vendors out there. Most tool vendors are phenomenal to work with and are very supportive, and we do our best to steer them all in the right direction.
And I think that's very progressive in a lot of ways, Steve. And I think that's something that, hopefully industry follows suit at some level. I still think there's obviously some room for improvement with, I think, almost the communication side, right? And George, I don't know, is there anything you learned off of this first piece where, just in talking to Noah and Dustin about, where they're learning and where they're finding out about the industry at? I know you're exposed to this all the time, so maybe it's not as new to you, but how important are those conversations with young people to understand what they're looking at?
They're vital to the future of our industry and the workforce, and having them understand that we do want them and we do welcome them. And some of the things that came up real early, and I think Dustin alluded to it very well, and Noah kind of brushed on it, but as businesses, you first have to make sure that your shop and facility is ready to take on an intern, a young person. When I tell people, if you can't see your children or grandchildren working in that shop, neither can I, And if that environment is caustic, you have to fix that first. The other thing too, and we've done this with the old AES model is now part of ASE. And some of the things that we still instill and talk about, and we're working on our Adopt a School program, is before you bring an intern into your place of business, the senior management needs to notify and have a meeting of all employees that this individual is coming to work. So when Noah walks through the door, somebody doesn't think it's a kid that's lost or the kid that's trying to find his way to the parts department. No, Noah's coming to work, and they know who Noah is, a little bit about Noah, and they welcome Noah in because that's important. The starter tool set. I've worked with some companies that have built in the tool set as part of the employment package, but there's an agreement between the employer and the entry-level employee that you have to work here 2 years before that becomes your property. And if you decide to leave, then guess what? You can leave, but it stays here. And if somebody has a bad day and says, I quit, and they're walking out the door, but they have no tools to go to the next job, they get over it and we get there. And after 2 years, if you haven't fostered any loyalty, give them the tools and send them down the road. The thing with the counselors, if you talk to certain counselors, they went to school until they completed whatever level of education they did. And then they went into education. And they literally went to the other side of the desk. And if they've never worked in other occupations or the workforce, they have no idea what we have to offer, and shame on us. I chaired the advisory committee at a high school in Houston, Cypress Ridge, the third largest school district in Texas. One advisory committee meeting a year we had at a local business. So we took educators and administrators out of their comfort zone and brought them into dealerships and shops. How many people have ever been past the sales floor of a dealership? None. How many people know how many occupations are there in an independent shop or a fleet or whatever? They don't. It's our fault. We haven't shown them. But when we show them in a positive way, we do things like parent nights and stuff like that, and shadow with students before we put them in the workplace to ensure they see what it is that we're doing and making sure this is the occupation that they're interested in. We also explain to them this is a learning initiative, not an earning initiative. Earning is something that comes along, but this is a learning initiative. And we're trying to ensure that this is a good fit for you and a good fit for us. So some of the earlier conversations are many of the things that we are working on and work on every day with at the foundation, and some new things that we're getting ready to bring out. And the biggest thing is we all talk a different language.
Yeah.
And I am blessed that I get to go to schools all over the country, and I've seen some of the best, and I've seen ones that I could tell you what's going on and you'd fall on the floor laughing. But it's actually sad because we're spending taxpayer money. Everybody on this call, if you're not involved in your local advisory committee, you're part of the problem. That's all there is to it. You're both a personal and professional taxpayer in your community. And if you're not involved in the decisions they're making in that community, in that program, you're part of the problem. That's all there is to it. And when you have an advisory committee meeting, make sure the highest level people in that school or institution are involved in that meeting. And make sure that they're there, and make sure they understand what's important to you.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Well, and I think that you hit on a key point there too, George, in that one of the things that a lot of the advisory committees I've been a part of, and this is no offense to anybody, I just think it's kind of one of those things where it's always been done that way, so we do it that way continually, is some of the check the box type stuff, right? And it really, you know, hey, we're coming in to get a free lunch and we're not going to offer. I mean, do you see the same thing, George?
Well, we have. I've done workshops, and we're getting ready to do another one through the foundation on April 8th on how to develop effective CTE advisory committees. But here's the thing. A group of administrators know that they have to have these industry advisory committees, and they tell poor Ben, go have an advisory committee. And Ben goes, what's an advisory committee? You know, well, just go get a bunch of people together. We'll serve them some lunch and we'll tell them how great we are. Nah, that's a waste of time, you know, and we allow that in schools where we don't, and industry drives the train. We're not having these conversations. Things are going the way they need to be going, and we're placing students in the workplace. And that's what it comes down to. Advisory committees. If you have a CTE program and you don't have an advisory committee that is specific to your program's needs, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And the most important person to serve on that advisory committee, believe it or not, is graduates of your program, because they're the true checks and balances of what they learned and what they've been able to apply and where the gaps are and how to fix those potential gaps. It's not that there's a problem with your program. It's just that things may have changed in the workforce, and without the feedback from that customer, there's no way to make program improvement.
Well, and even speaking to even curriculum too, George, I know there's times where if you go into one and you get this big list of curriculum and you're asked kind of, you know, where should we allocate hours to, there's some level of like, you know, this is what I know we need from a student, and we also need the other stuff. So how do you even out what?
Right. Yeah. We have to manage expectations. The problem with the word curriculum is you ask 20 people what curriculum is, you get 21 answers. You know what I mean? What we need to talk about is measurable outcomes. What is it that you as business and industry in your community expect or believe that these students should be able to do? What should they be able to be proficient in? What should they be exposed to? And what are the expectations? And that's really what we should be doing when we're talking about curriculum. And, you know, Ben's talking about getting his program ASE accredited. Well, in that task list and those things that we teach, there's flexibility. And that flexibility is the responsibility of business and industry to tell Ben, we don't need you to teach this, but this is really important. And if there's something that's not on the list that's important to them, let them add it.
So Steve, I think George hit on a point here, which it's unfortunate that George is so shy and really is has a tough time talking here. But no, I had to give you one hard time, George.
That's okay.
Steve, he hit on a really good point with what is the expectation of a student coming in, right? And when we talk about that, I think that's almost two different tiers, right? So you've got maybe that high school student that's coming in, could potentially be going to school, could potentially just be working full time, and then maybe that post-secondary student, that tech school kid that is, you know, just finishing up with their degree in automotive or diesel, you know, whatever it is. What is the expectation of a new employee that's kind of going those routes?
I think I want to go back to George and just thank him for his points on advisory boards and what they should be. I sit on many of them, and a lot of them are just kind of a rah-rah, scratch your back, eat some pizza, everything's great. And we've actually been able to make a lot of changes in a few schools with saying, hey, this is what they need to know. This is where we can start them, and now we can help them get that career that you keep promising them. And it's not just words, you know what I mean? So in answer to your question, there's different expectations of different levels of entry-level candidates, absolutely. We in our company, we use our Lube Center more as a training center than you might think. Nobody really hires anybody in our company to be a lube tech forever. That's not the part. In fact, I tell students, if you find yourself on the lube tech after a year and a half, then maybe you need to reevaluate what you're doing, where you're going, what you want to do. And I think the most important thing I try to share with my service managers is you have to have a clear-cut career path for that individual. Noah, you brought it up and it made me smile when you said that was one of the things you look for, because I believe it in my whole heart. If I can show that entry-level candidate a map and just say, this is where you need to be, they're going to be 10 times more successful. They're going to know where they are and where they're going. So we start most of our entry-level candidates are going to start in the Lube Center. And one of the main things in a Lube Center I try to teach and tell people too is the most important piece of equipment that a tech will ever have is actually a sheet of paper or something on a screen, and it's called a multi-point inspection. And if you don't know how to do that correctly and you can't do it right every time, you're not going to make the money you're going to make. You're not going to be safe to your customer, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on down the line. So when a candidate can be in a Lube Center and see 20 different vehicles a day as opposed to 2 for a while, they're doing 20 different inspections, they're going to get good at it, right? So we can take those entry-level candidates and then we can start basic training. Now I can take a student that's come from a school and maybe even had some manufacturer's training, and they may be going to more of an apprenticeship. They may be actually working right with a master level tech immediately and starting to do a little bit of higher level things. As we all know, in the dealership world, we're sort of strapped to what the manufacturer demands and expects with what that tech can do. So their certifications have to match up to the work that they're doing, and they're very stringent about that. Some schools do a good job of working with manufacturers to get some of that out of the way, but for the most part, that'll be the onus is on the dealership to do that. In fact, an entry level to a master level technician right now is well over $125,000 investment per individual per dealership. Now, the ROI on that's fantastic if you can keep that tech motivated and with you that long, because they're going to produce a lot and they're going to make a lot of money as well. So there's different levels to different students. We do seek students coming out of that secondary education as much as we can. I think it gives them more polish. It gives them a lot more grasp of the basics and builds a great foundation. And for some of them, and I think it helps them a lot to be out of the house for a while and get some of that independence so that they're sort of ready to start a career. And I think some schools do a really good job at that. I hope I haven't gone too long, but I think it's a pretty in-depth question. And I think that industry needs to strive to do better to not just say what they expect out of students, but say, hey, here's how we'll help you get there.
So,
I
and
want to
add
actually
to
add
Steve.
on to that. Sorry, George, go ahead.
I want to add on to Steve's, because Steve's group is a very large group. And if they can put interns or apprentices from high school programs into those dealers and foster that loyalty, then they can move them directly into a manufacturer specific program. And that's a true marriage between that student and that dealership. Those are positive. For Noah, I need you to know, Noah, we don't have a career ladder. We have a career lattice. And once you get the foundational skills, you can be anywhere. I came out of high school and went to work at an independent shop. And tonight I'm talking to you. There is no limitations in our industry. The only limitations live in your shoes. That's all there is to it. That is the wonderful thing about the transportation field. And we're excited to have you consider us, truly.
Yeah, I agree. Now, one thing I want to talk in a bit more detail about is how do we manage expectations as educators? And this is almost a two-part question, right? When I say that, we're obviously trying to get a student down a career path. And when we say that, maybe going through some level of education, right? And we want, if they're going through that education, one of the things that I notice is we make a lot of promises to a student, right? Like we make a lot of promises to a student, and they might be promises that they're not going to see for a while. How do we manage the expectations of the student coming into our industry to where, one, they know that they're not going to get everything right away, but then two, really, we want them to go into the program, but we also want them to be realistic so they stick around. And George, I know we'll talk about that stat of how many technicians leave the workplace within 2 years, because I think that's really, really important. But Steve, you're talking with schools every day. How do you manage that piece of, what the school said compared to what real life is?
God, I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of times it is so just convoluted, and sometimes it's ridiculous. Our average master tech makes well over $100,000, and that is attainable by somebody that puts the work in. But the key word is there: you've got to put the work in. And sometimes I think I work with schools constantly to stop that expectation of a student walking out of class and making over $100,000, right? I think that's something that has hurt both the schools, and it's hurt the dealerships as well, and independents and everybody else. So one big key that I do, and Noah, you can pay attention to this, and I'm sure you kind of talked about it a little bit too, is I want to find out what that student's passion is that got them wanting to do this. And then what I try to do is keep that alive. So let's say you've been a car guy all your life. You worked with your dad, and your dad liked to race, whatever, or your mom, okay? Keep that passion on racing going, because the entry-level part of your career is the most difficult. You've had a lot put into your head, but now we've got to get that experience to match up to with what's in your head and then take you to the next level. You have to have something that keeps you driven and keeps you loving it, more or less, right? And so I think I preach that at every school I go to, and I tell them that absolutely you can hit some of these great numbers and these great things that the school's told you can get. It's just, here's what the career path looks like, and here are the steps to achieve that. The steps are 1 to 10, not 1 and then 10.
George, I mean, anything you want to add to that?
No, Steve's right on. It's managing expectations. It's understanding the product that you have, the resources that you have. And once again, at Cypress Ridge, one of the things we did is we included the seniors in our advisory committee meetings. So they met with business and industry. Many of those students had an internship in that summer, and we wanted to know how they enjoyed the internship. But more importantly, we asked them if there's anything we can do for you, and that usually just blew them away. And getting them involved really helps. Ben said something earlier about his students love his program, and we talk about recruiting students. My Spanish teacher from high school was really smart guy. I didn't learn any Spanish, learned a lot of life lessons. But he told me water seeks its own level. You are who you associate with. And if you look at Ben's students right now, if they love his class, guess what? They're going to tell other students like themselves, and they're going to be in Ben's class. And Ben's not going to have to worry about counselors or other people. Now, if you got a class where there's some students that don't belong there, then for some reason, somebody or something has allowed them to believe that it's okay to be here and not be accountable. And got to fix that too. Because somebody like Steve is going to invest time and energy in that school. And if there's 20 or 40 kids in the program, but there's only 2 that really want to be there, is that a really good use of taxpayer dollars? Or did we really do justice to those students? And whether a student is just taking a course in a CTE course in high school or paying for it, it's just like if we buy something, if we don't like it, we take it back. Well, if the students don't get their money's worth, who do they go to for a refund? That's why we need to be, industry needs to be involved, and our programs need to meet national standards. I'm sorry, they really do. And we all need to be accountable. This is not a job. This is a career preparation program. And you have the ability to change young people's lives. And I am blessed, and people like Steve are blessed that we have the ability to change people's lives of people we'll never meet because of the things that we're trying to do with schools and programs and influence a generation. Ben, everything that Ben does, he's going to influence a few generations before he retires. And that's powerful. But we need to make sure there's a lot of people like Ben influencing these young people, and not people that, I'm sorry to say, retired and forgot to tell somebody. So, yep.
Ben, I actually want to pick on you here for a second in that regard. How do you set expectations for a student while trying to, like, if you've got that maybe an 8th grader or a freshman that you're trying to persuade to get into your class, or maybe there's not even a whole level of element to that, but do you see that where you've got to manage your expectations, or are they too early at that point to really understand that piece?
Some of them can get it at that point. There's definitely the kids that are just like, I want to do something trade related. And we'll get those kids for 4 years no matter what. The trick is taking that honor student and flipping them to being into a trade student. And it's doable. My first year teaching, I flipped the valedictorian to become a union electrician. He loves it, absolutely loves it. And so, we got to kind of put that in perspective of, like, where the growth is, what the potential is. I talked to a bunch of kids today, and, I think I said earlier, like, half of them said that they all wanted to be mechanics, but nobody actually has ever taken one of my auto classes. And I'm sorry, I'm blanking a little bit right here.
Well, no, I think that's like just the interest, and then you're trying to pique their interest enough to where they do take that next step to where they're enrolling in your class, right? And I think that might be that piece, and maybe not secondary as much as post-secondary or high school as much as a trade school. But I think there's times where I hate to say it this way, that maybe we embellish a little bit, right? Like where the opportunities are this. And Steve, I might kind of go to you there, just based on your upbringing, right? You had some level of, you were a technician, like you know kind of how this goes. How do we, that's the piece that I'm trying to really put my finger on, is how do we entice them into the industry without overpromising? And I don't know if that's coming off the right way. And I certainly don't want to sound like, the industry's a bunch of liars, but none of this stuff happens, because you said it right there. An average master level tech is making 6 digits. It's very, very possible, but I still don't know if we've landed that home,
Sure. Let me clarify one thing too, though. I was actually never a technician. And the reason that I was not a technician, I don't have that mindset. I struggle. I'm not that handy. And and I got into it. I love cars. I love the whole the fixed operations side of things. I had a skill set where I was good at fixing people. So I became a service advisor, and I worked with a team of technicians, and we helped each other out, right? They taught me the things that I didn't know. I sold their work and helped them communicate with the customer, and we all got to where we wanted to be. But for you to say, to ask me sort of how do we entice, I imagine you're saying, people into trades and into the technician realm. I'm going to take a big step backwards. We were talking earlier about guidance counselors, and I have to tell you, and I'm sorry if there's guidance counselors out there, I don't mean this offensively, but a lot of those people I call gatekeepers, and they really have a preconceived notion of what our industry is, and their biggest goal is to keep people out of that because they don't think that there's benefit to it. And I really think what we've tried to do, we do a two-part recruiting open houses with recruiters to schools. They can come to our dealership in the evening, and then they talk about the school. We're able to talk about our business, and then we let the students tour a shop. But I always say, make sure every one of their parents is here. And really, I think one of the ways to kind of circumvent some of the stuff that happens at school is to have the parents to have a clear idea of what this career can look like and what it can do for their student. I always, want to, some of the things George said, George and I have the great honor of being able to help change people's lives. I'm thrilled, and I actually say it a lot. How many of you people out there are talking to students have been told that without a 4-year degree, you won't be anything in life? And they all raise their hands. And I preface it by saying 4-year degrees are fantastic if it's something that you're going to use and that's the career you want to go into. But for some of you, this is what you want to do. And here's this mindset, and here's what you can achieve, and here's what you can do. I kind of read ahead, I'm sorry, but I saw one of the chat questions that said, we've always used salary as something to recruit with. And to be honest, when I first started that's really as far as you had to go, is, hey, this is what you can make. And that's what everybody was motivated by. We found now with younger generation and the way things are changing, we have to incentivize them with a lot different things. So we work with a lot of creative scheduling. We have one shop in Great Falls, Montana that does a phenomenal job. These guys work 13-hour shifts, and I think they work three of them, and then they have 4 days off.
Wow.
Just crazy stuff that he was able to accomplish that they're, everybody's happy. They're producing, they get the time off that they want. Our benefits package has really changed weight a lot to paid time off. Great help with, we're becoming to have employee clinics at a lot of our places that are no copay. Our employees can go right into the clinic at the store. So we're doing a lot of things like that, and we're listening. We are listening. Sometimes it takes a little while to turn a big ship, but we're certainly looking at different ways to incentivize them and attract people to look at this career as it's not just run by the dollar and punch in a clock. There's some different things to do that. And one more thing, I'm sorry, I know I'm going along.
No, go ahead, Steve.
The other thing is technology. Technology draws new people to this. The days of the shade tree mechanic are over. If you don't have a good grasp of electronics, you cannot be a technician anymore. Everything's connected to electronics, diesel, auto, whatever it is. You have to have a good understanding of electronics, and that, my friends, is one of the STEM things. STEM learning. So it takes a lot more of this than it ever used to, and that attracts a lot more people, I think. I'll get off my bones.
Well, Noah, I think that kind of goes back to you a little bit too. When you were, 20 years ago, I can't imagine somebody wanting to go into computer science and then shifting to work on cars. Did that go into your decision making a little bit as far as the technology side of what you're seeing?
A little bit, yeah. It was more like a mixture of a bunch of things I like to do. I've probably taken 5 classes out of my program, and 2 of them were basic and advanced electronics already, just not even a year into my program. So, it's a huge part of everything we do.
That's amazing. George, I think you might have had something there.
Well, listening to both Dustin and Noah, they're telling you what's important to them. And I believe what they're saying is important to them can echo for many of people similar to them. And Steve, you said it best. altering the schedule and thinking outside the box. The one problem with us gray hairs and no hairs is we've been doing this since Moby Dick was a guppy, and this is the way it's always been, and that's the way it'll always be. But we have to stop and listen to our customer, and that's the Noahs and the Dustins of the world. And if we don't listen to them, they're going to go find another home who's willing to listen to them and take that knowledge and that dedication with them. And you're right. It doesn't have to be about the almighty dollar. Dustin, he's got a family, and it's that flexibility. Noah's got his, but when Noah gets a little bit older, and if he has a family, all of a sudden that's going to be a priority for him. So it already needs to be in the mix for him to know that if he wants to grow with this company, that's a component of this. And I think sometimes we forget that our customer is our employees.
Big time.
I just got to
Ben, go
throw
ahead.
on to George there just a little bit, because I came from industry, and part of the reason I got into education is I know what my schedule is. When I was in industry, I did 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. I took a service truck all over the place. I got sick of it.
Yeah, it's now, Dustin, I want to kind of circle back to you from when we opened this conversation, and we talked about, we kind of touched on, was industry truly reflected like it was sold to you prior to you getting in here? What would you say about that piece? Was it, I mean, has it been, you obviously love your job, love everything you do, but was the picture that was painted prior to you getting into the industry the same as kind of what you're seeing now?
For the most part, yeah. I will admit that when I first got into the industry, I did think of more of as I'm trying to think of the way George put it, but the greasy mechanic. You know, I thought it was going to be a lot more engine work, and I didn't realize how much these vehicles, it doesn't matter diesel or gas side, how much has become so electrical. So lucky for me, I mean, I'm going to kind of, burst my own bubble here, but, I was very good at figuring stuff out like that. I have kind of struggled, I have an electrician in my family. So being able to learn electrical is kind of easy, but at the same time, I've never had to look at drawing diagrams before. I've never had to look at, schematics and this stuff. So that was a whole new area for me to kind of learn. So there was a lot of things where I was like, oh, wasn't really expecting that one. But, the way that with the program that I'm going through to learn, they do a phenomenal job of teaching and breaking everything down. So you're not just going to look at it and go, that looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. It's like, okay, well, I understand what everything means. I know what these numbers mean. I want to know what these symbols mean. I know that, each line on there actually represents a certain length of the wire. So it's neat how they break everything down and try and, get it basically put in layman's terms of how to learn everything, because we're not all engineers. We don't know their language. So we need it as more of a layman's terms because, I'll put it this way, we're kind of grill apes in the diesel side. So we kind of need a more breakdown and try and learn it more specifically. So it's been a process, but yeah, as far as my expectations, wasn't exactly, but it wasn't a bad change of expectation.
Oh, I love that. That's great insight. I think that's something we're looking for to get more, more of that, right? More of that type of conversation where, this is what was sold to me. This is what I actually got, and making sure the two, kind of match, which can be very, very difficult. Now, Jared Deskins has a question, and I think I'm going to go to George with this one because I'm going to go back to our stat that we talked about earlier. Are you tracking your students to see if they are still in the industry 1, 3, 5 years out? If so, what's the most common reason for defection? And one of your quotes, George, that I'm fascinated with is that we do a better job of eating our young than any other industry out there. And the stat that you point to is 42% of technicians leave the workplace within 2 years.
Correct.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
So the ASC Education Foundation did a survey a couple of years back of students and graduates, and really in-depth survey, asked a lot of interesting questions. But what we found is we lose 42% in the first 2 years. 18% of those go on to other technical trades. What does that tell us? That they want to work with their hands, they just don't want to work with us anymore. The sad one is 14% go to retail food sales. That screams McDonald's, Buc-ee's, all of that to me. That's a problem. That's a real problem. And what I mean by eating our young is some employers say, if you can get them to show up on time and show up every day and not make my customers mad, I'll do the rest. But then when the kid shows up, you expect them to be able to diagnose the most intricate product. So managing expectations. But if these cars today and trucks are so sophisticated, if there is no mentor to guide that individual into your shop culture and get them to be able to seamlessly move into that work environment from the classroom, and you send them on their own and expect them to be profitable in the first week, they're going to leave. And how many people on this call have heard or said this statement? I hired this kid out of this high-powered tech school. He rolls in his big red toolbox. I put him on a job the first day and he screwed it up. Well, did he really? Or did he do it the way he was taught and he'd used the process and procedure, but your organization circumvented the process and procedure to get the customer's vehicle out faster, and there was nobody to tell him that was your process and procedure. And now all of a sudden you got a kid that was all excited and you just knocked his legs out from under him and he's going, I don't want no part of this. Those are the things. We eat our young because we're not mentoring them into the industry. We think that it's an expense. It's not. It's an investment. If you know what it costs you to hire a technician, what does it take to put out an ad, do everything to hire a technician? If you know that number, and many of the fleets that I work with know that number, it's between $7,000 and $9,000. And if you've got a bunch of technicians and a high turnover rate, isn't there a better way to spend your money? You know what I mean? We've got to stop eating our young. We've got young people like Noah, and based on the information we received from Kyle Holt and SP2, this year, even with COVID, we can put our finger on over 131,000 students taking automotive classes in the US. That doesn't sound like a shortage to me. But if we lose 42% of those in the first 2 years, that's our problem. And those kids are going to tell other kids, and we're going to lose some of our programs. We really need to make sure that if we're going to invest in a young person's future or a veteran, that we make sure they transition into our organization and let them know that they're part of the family. Does that make sense?
That is really impactful, George. I mean, I think that's something for those of you that are taking notes and wanting to take something home. That is such a powerful statement. Even the eating our young piece. I mean, that is next level good stuff.
Well, and COVID and all of its bad things have produced some good things. I just wrote an article in Fleet Maintenance. COVID, like Ben said, we are essential employees. That's a powerful piece. But more than anything else, we're having this meeting today that we probably wouldn't have if it was for COVID. Many school advisory committees are virtual. Steve can sit in his office and attend 30 or 40 advisory committee meetings in 30 or 40 states and impact a large number of students. Executives from high-powered companies can actually be guest speakers in schools, or technicians that can relate to people like Noah and Dustin from a distance, because it's allowed now and it's a great option. Ben's kids are virtual. Don't you think they'd like to hear from somebody besides Ben one day? No offense, Ben. You know what I mean?
Talked about it
every day.
I think they might want to listen to him all the time. Steve, go ahead. You got something, and maybe to add on to what George is saying?
I love what George added there. Certainly, it's changed the way we do business, and I do appreciate the fact that we can reach out and do this, and then we do have virtual career fairs and virtual presentations all over the place. I will say this, and maybe it's because I'm a little bit old school. I'm never going to accept that this is the new normal. I'm a people front in your face guy. I miss so much, you know, those classroom presentations and those individual interview days and stuff like that. But I reach out to so many different schools now and just offer this, you know, that I will happily do a virtual little presentation to your class and talk, you know, not just about Lithia, but also about the industry and what they can expect, you know, from the industry, and then also what we expect of them. And I think sometimes that helps them get off on the right foot to kind of pick and choose where they want to go.
So just to expand upon that a little bit, Steve, one of the things George brought up was the mentoring part, right? And when we talk about mentoring, one of the, you know, we just did either a WrenchWay Weekly or a podcast on this. But one of the things that I talked about was I had taken a leadership role at a dealership at one point, walked out to the shop, and, you know, they listed out and they were very proud of their mentorship program that they had there. And when I walked out to the shop and saw this gentleman who is a mentor for this younger tech that was still in trade school, still in an automotive or a diesel program, said, "Hey, you know, how's it going with so and so? You know, you see that you're a mentor and wondering, you know, how that's going." And he said, "What the hell are you talking about?" I said, "Well, they were talking about how you're a mentor to little Johnny over here." And he said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so when we talk about a process for a mentorship program and, you know, really kind of putting the pieces together so that we don't eat our young, what are important pieces there, Steve, to where we can make sure that, one, the person knows that they're a freaking mentor, like, and that they have some type of training and that they know what to do and what they're supposed to show them. A lot of times from my experience, it's, "Hey, you're a mentor, take care of this kid." And there's not that next level of like, how do we make this actually productive?
Great question. And I think it starts with service manager. And I think that all service managers, they want to stay service managers now, have to start figuring out how to grow their own techs. Okay. And when I say grow our own techs, it starts at a school. It starts with Ben, giving them those foundations and getting them kind of trained to be trained, if you will, you know, and then we can take them to the next level. But one of the great things about mentorships is it's actually helped us to extend careers of technicians. You know, there's no doubt about it, and especially, I'm sure, Dustin, you can agree with this. You know, when you're working on a big diesel, there's only so much the body can do. And at some point in time, you break down. And we're able to actually extend the careers of some of our great technicians and putting them into more of a mentorship. And even when they're still doing work, they're actually paid partly by what they do as a team with that apprentice technician. So it benefits both of them to be involved in this process. But it starts with the service manager. The service manager has to have a mentoring attitude, and then he or she can bring that into their shop and make sure that's being accomplished.
Can I add to that real quick?
Absolutely.
So I agree with you 100% on that, because one of the biggest issues with a mentorship, if there's not per se a incentive to the mentor, the biggest issue I have seen is the mentor wants to continue doing his work because he doesn't want to get off of that job. He doesn't want to lose his efficiency and his time on that by going and teaching somebody else. So if there's not a way that the mentor can be incentivized or some kind of way that he doesn't hurt his efficiency per se, he's not going to want to do that. He's not going to want to actually go and teach and be there and, you know, ensure that his apprentice is doing it properly. And that's kind of the biggest issue I've seen in the past. Like I said, in the past, I'm lucky I have guys that are willing to do that, but I have seen that in the past in other shops and talking to friends and other, you know, people who are in the industry. That's one of the biggest fights they have, is they say, I have nobody to teach me. I'm supposed to go to this guy, but he always tells me he's too busy.
Dustin, you nailed it. When we're talking a flat rate technician, right? It's production, 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 and however they can do it faster, they're going to do better. Correct. So that's why I kind of wanted to really make sure that we understand it starts with that service manager. That service manager is going to have to sharpen his pencil and get creative with some pay plans. It doesn't cost you anymore, really. And like George, you made a great point, and I use the same word all the time. Throw away cost and replace it with investment, because that's exactly what it is. And you're not only investing in that student, I mean, you're investing in that long-term employee that has done you good. That employee can keep doing you good, just in a different realm. And it's actually with that employee sharing their knowledge, you're going to get way more ROI than just production, right? So you made a great point, Dustin, and it has to be an incentivized process. I mean, that mentor has to be compensated for his or her time, for sure.
That's one of the things that we're working on. It was in the old AES model we're working on, the mentor compensation and how to look at it multiple ways. But also the most important thing that we have to talk about here when it comes to mentor is the selection of the mentor. Without that will make or break your program. You can have all the incentives in place. If you go to somebody and say, the kid's coming in at 8 o'clock, make sure he doesn't die, your responsibility. That's not the mentor. And there's certain people that will never be mentors. And a good friend who's no longer with us, Don Gray, who was president of AES for years, he said it best. It's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and one of your best customers comes in and needs something looked at on their car. Who are you going to ask to stay? That's probably a good person. Somebody who's already involved with students in church activities or Pop Warner or sports or scouting or something like that. Somebody who already likes working with youth. And then train them. And we're working on some updated training for mentors and interns or apprentices. But you've got to train them. You've got to make sure that they have the tools to take this person, somebody like Noah, and take that passion and drive it. And let them know that they're part of the family. That's really important these days, because many of us grew up with a mom and dad and one car when we were kids. That's not the family today. And a lot of times, this generation, they're looking to work to be that family for them. And if you could be that family, it's life.
Well, and we're actually up on our time for the roundtable. We have a load of questions. So what I'm thinking we'll do now is, if our panelists wouldn't mind going through either the chat or the Q&A and making sure that if there's any questions geared toward you, that maybe you go ahead and answer those. While we're doing that, the last piece of tonight is we're going to bring on Mark Wilson, who, as I mentioned earlier, is my business partner here at WrenchWay and with Find a Wrench. I hate to cut some of our conversation short, so hopefully we can keep the Q&A going, and maybe we'll take some after Mark is finished off. But what Mark is going to do is kind of give you a kind of a sneak peek of what we've got with WrenchWay School Connect. And I think this is a way to help implement a lot of what we talked about today, right? And getting industry more involved with schools, and just kind of hopefully putting a bridge there for the gap that currently is the gap between schools and industry. So Mark, I don't know if I've got you here or not, but yeah, there you are.
Yep.
I'll let you take over if you don't mind.
Can you hear me all right there, Jay?
Can hear you just fine.
All right. Well, awesome job tonight, guys. I could listen to this all night. We knew this would be a good one. We had over 1,000 attendees, and it was amazing content. I was talking to Sarah in our marketing group that for a while there, I think George had me ready to, suit up for a football game or something. He that enthusiasm is infectious. But yeah, I'll keep this very brief. I know it's late. It's gone on kind of a while. One thing Sarah wanted me to point out is all the questions, we can send those out both to the panelists that they can address, and then we can email answers and stuff too, because there's just no way we'll get to all of them. But really, we wanted to take a few minutes on this panel and talk about, it's called WrenchWay School Connect. We're going to be launching it next week. This is just a sneak peek we're doing here, but I think it's fitting to get feedback. And if some of you guys on the panel want to stick around and add comments when I'm done too. But we wanted to create something that was free, first of all. So there will be no charge for any shops, dealerships, anyone that's part of it. Definitely no charge for high schools or post-secondary schools that are on it. And the other concept we wanted, we just recently brought on a new team member. Kristen is her name. She'd worked with George in the past. She'll be leading this effort for us. And she had a phrase that I loved. Come to find out now, she kind of stole it from George. But we're using it for our School Connect program. And it's local solutions to a national problem. So many times I think people want these huge, we just wait for the massive OEMs to do something about this, or maybe they'll change the way guidance counselors get incentivized, and states might change some of that. And that was a good part of the discussion earlier. But there are so many little things that everyone can do to just make changes in their own community. And if that starts to snowball, all of a sudden, there's less of a shortage. Some of these issues that we all talk about all the time start to get resolved. And before I kind of share my screen here, I want to make it clear that this is for schools of all sizes. Ben has an amazing new school in Verona, a pretty large one, at least for our area. Jay and I grew up in very small towns about an hour from where Ben is. Neither of our high schools even have an auto program, but they can benefit from this as well, even if it's just a speaker or something coming in. So really, I don't think those schools should use it as an excuse. Same thing for the shops or the dealers. Steve and his team does an amazing job at Lithia. They're one of, if not the largest auto group in the country and growing very fast. But if you're a one location place like Jay's dad's independent shop, those guys can help out too. So we wanted to build something that was inclusive, easy to use, doesn't cost anything, everyone can use it. So with that, let me just share my screen. Again, I'm going to not show every like bell and whistle on this, so I'll keep it very short. But really, what we're doing, so hopefully you can see this WrenchWay screen now. We wanted to create almost like a listing or a better version of Craigslist kind of, but only for schools and industry to interact. So Ben had mentioned earlier, one of the first things he did was go around to all the local industry, people that hire and people that can help out their program. It's awesome you did that, Ben, but those are things, honestly, that we feel you shouldn't have to do. We wanted to create a platform that we can aggregate all the people that want to be part of it from industry, but also any school that wants to be part of it as well, and create a free tool where essentially you come in, and if you're a school and you're looking for a speaker, you can create a project saying, hey, next semester, we'd love for someone from a dealership to come in, or someone from OEM or whatever it is. You can post a project on that. Or if, Ben, you also mentioned next year you'll be looking to get ASE certified. And I know we played a small part in helping you get a couple cars donated. So someone can post that they're looking for that, this year and next year, or even something much smaller, just extra tools that you could donate to help kids in your program. Work opportunities, virtual speakers, really the sky's the limit. Our job was to build the platform and get people to sign up for it, and that's what we're going to be doing. But once they're signed up, the instructors can come in here and very simply create a new project, just put a title, put a description, put what the category is, and add some images. And you can see we're launching this next week, so these are some fake ones we made up quickly. Someone in our marketing team did it. So I'll just pick this one. Once I click on it, I can see what the school's asking for. I can send them a message. Once I do that, I can have a whole conversation back and forth. So no more if you're in industry trying to get through gatekeepers and things like that. This way, the instructors can post exactly what they're looking for, and you can kind of raise your hand and say, well, we have some of those parts laying around. We'd love to donate those, or yes, we definitely want to come in and be a speaker. And the same thing is true on the shop side. So they can post, instead of just scrolling through the school stuff, they can say, we have an apprenticeship program or internship, or we would have an extra car we can donate. Dustin's company, Truck Country, a couple months ago, they told us they had a couple engines that they were looking to get rid of, and basically said, you guys go find a home for them. And so Jay was able to find a couple local high schools to give those to. So same thing, they can post, we call them projects, but it's really stuff you're willing to do or donate. Super simple concept. My background on the software side, I love creating tools like this. This is one of the simpler ones we have, but it's also needed, I think. So many times we talk to them, we've helped a lot of schools the last 6 months or so get in touch with companies in their industry, and pretty much everyone is willing to help, it seems like, at least the good ones. Sometimes you run into people that are a little too worried, in my opinion, about immediate ROI. And Steve and others on the panel talked about that, and how today you have to grow your own techs. And of course, it's going to help your shop. You get future techs. It helps your existing employees. People want to work for companies that want to help the next generation. Honestly, you could probably get customers out of it if you go in and speak. Today's digital age, have someone take some photos or record that, share it on your company Facebook page. That's not why you're doing it, but it definitely will help in the community. And people want to buy or take their car in to get fixed at places that help and give back. So anyway, I kind of got on a tangent there. That's one of my hot button issues of people that maybe worry a little too much about immediate ROI, when there's definitely medium and longer term ROI on it. But with that, Jay, I'm going to turn it over because there's a lot of other kind of cool things in here and others that we'll add. But because it's late, I just wanted to show the basic concept, and then I'll end it with, we are launching this next week. You can go out to wrenchway.com if you're a school, or if you're in industry and your company wants to sign up. Again, it's completely free. If you want to email us, just info@wrenchway.com as well. Right now, we have just kind of a basic teaser on the website, but this will be fully up and running next week, and we look forward to getting people using it. If and when it takes off, we'll add more functionality to it. But I think it resonates with a lot of what I heard on the panel of what we build with this platform isn't going to solve all of that, but we can get the conversation started, and we can help people move forward and kind of do their part, and go back to the saying from George that we're going to be using a lot with this program, which is creating local solutions to a national problem. So I'm going to kind of unshare my screen here and ask Steve or George or Ben kind of what you guys think. I know it's the first time you've seen it, and I'm putting you on the spot a little, and I'm not giving you a full demo like I normally would, but hopefully you get enough of the picture of it.
Do you have something, Mark, that you can send me like in an email? I'm actually traveling to a school Sunday, and then I've got some more school visits coming up, and I would love to share this with them.
Yep, definitely. I will definitely send that, and we'll get it posted. Sarah's here sitting next to me. Maybe we'll speed up some of the stuff on the website too to get that publicly available. So even though the product won't be fully launched till next week, we can get the materials on the site this week. But Steve, in general, I mean, you guys already do a lot with schools, but talk to me about I think this is a
fantastic idea. I just think that they can reach a much broader audience, and kind of get some of the things that they need and really get their message out. And it certainly, like you brought up, I mean, it helps all of us. So I'm very excited that you're adding this to your list of offers. It's great.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ben, on the school side, kind of what are your initial thoughts? If you would have had this before you reached out to all those in the community, would that have saved you some time?
Yeah, I would save a bunch of time, because when you are setting something up with industry, you're not just going to drop in, you know, you're going to schedule it, you're going to set it up, you're going to be as professional as you can. You know, and I think I'd really encourage industry to be super proactive about this, because as the teachers, I can tell you like 95% of us are super hesitant to just come out and ask for something. Really, really hesitant. Like, you know, I wouldn't, you know, I could have a great conversation with Steve. We could bounce a bunch of ideas across each other, but I'm not willing to just be like, hey, Steve, can you do this for me? Like, in my opinion, I need to get him a tech first. I need to prove my end first before I'm going to ask him for something. But that's not the feasible thing. That's not always what's right. So
Yeah, no.
I like the idea. I think it's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And that's one of the reasons at first we did have just schools post what they're looking for. And then we added the ability for shops and dealers to post things they're willing to do, because it'll help marry that up quite a bit. George, you know that Kristen, you know her very well. She'll be running and taking the lead on this. So it's in very capable hands, but what are your comments on some of it?
This is great. A lot of everybody, as you know, are trying to do different things. This is exciting. One of the things that I think when we talk about either independent shops, fleets, or dealerships, a lot of times there's cars that are left in the service for 6 months or whatever. They don't get picked up, or they don't whatever. And somebody can go and do the simple process of a mechanic's lien, get a title. And if they're late model vehicles, even if they need some stuff, you know what's wrong with them if it hasn't been. But the school can use those cars for the students. And once they get them back up and running, then they can use them for so many other different things. And whether it's the ASE Education Foundation or Kraft or you guys or whoever, we're all in this together. And that's what we have to understand. It's not him or them. And if we continue to bring attention to the concern and the need and the opportunities, I think we're all going to win in the long run. And, you know, bottom line is the Dustins and the Noahs of the world are the people that we want to show that we care, but more importantly, we're thankful that you chose us. That's what's important. You know what I mean? And hopefully other people come along with them from time to time.
Well said.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Everything made sense tonight. And Jay, maybe I'll turn it back to you. You had mentioned going through the comments. The number of them, I don't know how practical that is unless there's a few that you really want to address. But I'm going to turn it back over to you to either end it or keep the conversation going. Just kind of be cognizant we are over time already for people.
Yeah, nobody needs to hang on by any means. But I guess I just want to take this time to thank our panelists for tonight. Your insights and what you're doing in different capacities for the industry are exceptional, and we couldn't do it without you. I think that the way that this went tonight was interesting. I think it's nice to be able to tie that full circle back together, and just wanted to say thank you to all of you for taking time out of your days, actually your nights, which you've all had long days, I'm sure. So we genuinely appreciate your efforts on this panel and for kind of going the extra mile to help us out. Hopefully you guys see some benefit out of it as a result. So thank you to you. Thank you to everybody that commented over the course of the roundtable. I could not keep up with the questions or the chat. And so I think that's that shows the interest and the want from industry and from education to want to make this process better. So thank you to all of you. I genuinely really appreciate all of you and everything that you're all doing to support the industry and move us forward. So that's all I've got for the night. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add, but that's I'll drop off now.
Hey, thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you, everybody.